Welcome, everyone, to the White Coats on Race and APAMSA podcast. From roundtable discussions of current health topics to recaps of our panels with distinguished leaders in the healthcare field to even meeting current student leaders within the organization. This is White Coats and Rice. My name is Shaying Zhang, or Ying, and I'm a rising fourth-year student at the University of Nevada, Reno School of Medicine and the current communications vice president here at APAMSA. And I'll be your host today. I'm excited to introduce our guest, James or Jameson Chua. He is a third-year medical student at Touro University, Nevada, College of Osteopathic Medicine, interested in psychiatry. Born and raised in San Diego, California, to Chinese Filipino immigrant parents, James grew up immersed in the city's vibrant hip-hop dance scene. He later attended the University of San Diego, earning a Bachelor of Arts in Biology while actively engaging with student life through Sigma Pi fraternity and the Filipino American Student Organization, as well as the LGBTQIA+ group Pride. After graduating, James worked in an infectious disease research at the Scripps Research Institute. Motivated by his long-standing dream of becoming a physician, he went on to complete a Master of Science in Biomedical Sciences at Drexel University College of Medicine in Philadelphia. James began his medical journey at Touro University, Nevada. He quickly became active in the student community. He is involved with the local PAMSA chapter, Culinary Medicine Club, the Volleyball Club, and outside of school, James enjoys cooking, is an avid escape room enthusiast, and watching RuPaul's Drag Race with his Shiba Inu Beagle mix. James most recently served as the National Fundraising Director for PAMSA, where he raised thousands of dollars through creative initiatives and helped unite over 40 chapters during Community Impact Week. As the incoming national president, he is committed to strengthening the connection between National PAMSA and its local chapters, fostering collaboration, cultural pride, and advocacy for the unhappy community. Thank you for joining me today, James. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Ying. Thank you for that very lovely introduction. I have a lot to live up to with how colorful that all was when I'm just, your average third year medical student. But how are you doing?
I'm doing really great. Thank you for asking. And James, you're in no way the average student. You've done so much for PAMS already, and I'm really excited to talk about everything you've done and kind of the motivations behind all that. With that, can I get into my first question? How and why did you first get involved with the PAMSA?
Yeah, of course. I feel like this is a tale shared by so many members within the national board or local chapters. I was personally looking for a space where I felt welcomed, where I felt seen, where I felt visible, and that was very evident right away. I remember growing up, in San Diego, California, that is a very diverse space. But despite that, I remember in elementary school, I was one of maybe three Asian kids, the literal only Filipino in my class, right? And that was in San Diego. And then I remember going into high school. Coincidentally, I was placed in I guess this is the story of every medical student, but I was in all honors courses, right? Or AP courses. And so in that space, a lot of the students there were Asian, and so suddenly my immersion into my own cultural identity began to manifest, right? And then now we're finally into the college era where I knew my Asian identity really mattered because I went to the University of San Diego, and for those of you who aren't familiar with that particular undergraduate university, it's not UC San Diego, which is the Tritons, which has the amazing research facilities in the building that kind of looks upside down, kind of like a triangle. And it's not San Diego State, which is commonly regarded as the party school. No, it's neither of those. It's the private Catholic school, the one on the hill that is known for its campus. With that being said, though, I remember being at that school since it was a private institution. A lot of the student body there is predominantly affluent, or to get straight to the point, a lot of them were white, you know? And so being the only Asian amongst, thousands of students, not only Asian, but being a part of a minority, it didn't really click with me until I once had one of my friends from high school come to visit me. And she was like, Yo, I can't wait to meet all your friends and see how you're doing and blah, blah, blah. And then I remember we were like all out and then we were having a good time doing what college students do. And then I had like a private time with my best friend from high school. And she was reflecting and she was noticing how, like, she was like, James, it's interesting, like your friend group. And I'm like, oh, why? And then she was like, they're all like so tall and so pretty. And in the back of my head, I'm like, oh, so I fit in, right? Like I'm 6 foot, I match in. But then she followed up with, and they're so white. And then it made me think about like the tokenization of my existence, of my identity and how I fit in and so forth. And then that's when I realized like it really does matter to me being around like other people who share like cultural experiences and such. And so that's why when you were talking about my college experiences and what I was involved with. That's why I was so active in the Filipino org or the queer org, USD's Pride organization. And so that was just a very long-winded way of saying that when I wanted to be in medical school and eventually, be a leader, one of the things that did matter to me is my cultural identity. And so, more specifically, I remember at Touro University in Nevada, immediately seeing the local chapter of APAMSA and wanting to be involved in it, And I was attending all the events and stuff, and I immediately joined like the local chapter leadership. And one of the first events that was hosted was a sort of like a residency panel sort of situation, like speak to current physicians, how to be successful in medical school type of panel. And at that space was Dr. Kevin Ryutzel, uh, the national president of APAMSA, I believe from 2013 to 2016, and a former Touro alum. And he was talking about his time about on national APAMSA and the importance of just like being in tune with your cultural identity and how that really shapes your outlook on your patient community and just like overall experience within medicine. And that's what prompted me from going from the local chapter to the national organization. And so that's ultimately why it's to be in touch with my roots as much as possible. Because, I remember I was once a medical scribe. Somewhere in that long history lesson, I was also a medical scribe, right? And being able to serve in a clinic as a medical scribe for a community that was predominantly all, marginalized communities or minority communities, seeing the way that, the physician I was scribing for, the way he interacted with these people coming from that sense of cultural competency, that is what inspired me. And like, that is what I want to continue to foster within myself and challenge myself to grow, and I feel like there's no other space within medical school that will like really allow you to do this other than an affinity based org. And if you're trying to, improve your cultural competency about, the AANHPI experience, there's no better org than APAMSA.
Thank you, James. That was really insightful to not only your background, but some of the motivations that I'm sure a lot of our audience members share. That sense of wanting to belong in a bigger whole and to, increase our overall cultural competency as well as do something more for our community. And that kind of leads into our next question. So you started first as a member, and now you're the national president. And for our listeners, traditionally the national president role is filled by someone with more executive board involvement. As the national fundraising director last year, James was a part of the national board instead of the executive board. But of course, he had a vision. He wanted to implement certain things within APAMSA, and that really drove him to become national president. So, James, can you highlight what your vision was for APAMSA when stepping into this new role?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Yeah, jumping from fundraising director straight into the national presidency was like essentially unprecedented, other than Kevin Ryutzel, right? And from what he told of me for his personal experience, it was that it was only directors running for the national presidency role at that time. But for me, like, what drove my particular vision for what I want to do with the organization or what we can all do together is all predicated within my work as the fundraising director. I remember thinking like I came in with such like guns a-blazing essentially. Like I remember hosting a Valorant tournament right away, working with comms to launch all of these social media posts. You know, I remember working with membership and health affairs to launch Community Impact Week. And then it made me really understand the full capacity of what an individual director can do. And so that's why I wanted so desperately to become the national president, because I wanted to empower our directors to recognize like all of the power that they have, you know, just as a medical student and what they can do to inspire other students of a similar caliber. You know, all it takes is just that like one bout of inspiration to completely change your outlook on medicine, your outlook on advocacy, and all of the like, you know, like that's exactly what Kevin Rietzel did for me when he was at that panel. And so that's what I really wanted to push for as the national president to keep inspiring our medical students, our AANHPI medical students, and just medical students in general to want to make a difference, especially as it pertains to health equity. And for me, more specifically, like one of the sort of main goals as a national president is to really foster a sense of collaboration, a sense of solidarity, not just within the national board, but also outside peer organizations. Because if the mission of APAMSA is to one, start off with on Hoppy Health and improve on Hoppy Health outcomes, you know, and on Hoppy Health cultural competency, right? But ultimately, it's under the banner of we are fighting for health equity. And so, with that being said, collaboration is at its core of what we are all hoping to do at APAMSA. And so that means partnering with other organizations that share that similar mission. For example, LMSA, SMNA, MSPA, just a bunch of other organizations that I highly encourage our listeners to learn more about, you know. But in essence, these are all examples of peer organizations that share a mission of health equity. Because when we really get down to the root of what is health equity, it doesn't just stop with us as Asian Americans or unhappy individuals. Health equity will not be achieved until we advocate for all communities. And that's why I really want to push our organization to work with others so we can all uplift one another in this like wild world, you know? But yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, James. I wanted to follow up regarding after you were freshly elected as national president. All of our presidents have to give essentially an acceptance speech, and yours was particularly memorable. At that time, you brought up your mom. Can you share about that story a little bit and how she has inspired you towards your medical journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I remember I was very worried at the national conference about creating an acceptance speech. So I essentially did not, but I let my heart like sort of guide the way. And I thought about like what really inspired me to want to become the national president, what inspired me to want to become a medical student or a physician in general. And that was my mom, you know, like for so many children of immigrants, you have that very like, it's essentially that tough love sort of experience, you know, where like they're you probably won't hear like, "Oh, I'm so proud of you," but you will get a plate of cut up fruit or something, you know, as you're studying. For me, that was sort of my experience. Very tough love from my mother. Um, but she was always so supportive of me throughout my entire journey. And I remember I may not have ever heard, you know, like, "Hey, I'm proud of you," or "Good job." But I did eventually hear how proud of me she was. And that stemmed from, you know, it was around my second year of college, you know, during my pre-med experience, arguably one of the most like critical times of a budding physician's journey, right? With that
Right.
being said, my mom, she passed away due to lung cancer, you know, which was a really, as you can imagine, very challenging time. as a medical student or as a pre-med student, as a college student for me. I remember thinking, do I take a leave of absence? Do I ask to postpone all of my tests, all of my finals? And I remember there was something very particular about this whole experience, aside from the very traumatic experience that is losing your mother. I remember we found out what was happening around the beginning of December. It was essentially like a complete 180, like she wasn't able to speak, she wasn't able to do anything. And we weren't sure why. And we immediately took her to the emergency room. And that's when like they told us like the prognosis and how, they were like, your mom probably only has like 6 months to a year to live. And I was like, okay, that's kind of wild. And I remember wanting to help so badly, like there was something I wish I could do anything as like just a pre-med, and I remember my first thought was like after like she was just situated and she had to be like admitted into the hospital, I went back to school because I was living on campus at the time and like I didn't know anywhere else to go but my research lab because I know nobody else was going to be there at like 7 p.m. at night. And so I went in there, I went into my research lab, and oddly enough, there was someone in there, and it so happened to be my PI, right? Dr. Valerie Homan, an immunologist, comparative immunologist specifically. And she was shocked to see me there. But more so, I was shocked to see her there because what is a PI doing there that late at night? Regardless, she was like asking me what's up because like she was like surprised to see me there and so forth. And I was telling her what happened. And then she was like, they told you 6 months or like a year? And I'm like, yeah. And then she was like, I know you're not asking, but I'm just going to be honest with you. I would be surprised if she made it to the start of like the next semester. And the next semester was going to be the end of January, right? And this was like the beginning of December. And that honesty really shaped the way I like saw medicine, right? Um, it's about being authentic to the love, like to the patient's loved ones, not giving them a sense of false hope, you know? And she was right because my mom ended up passing away less than about 2 to 3 weeks later on Christmas specifically. And ever since then, I've always wanted to fight to do something more to help her, you know? I remember after graduating, I was contemplating still going into medicine. Like that was always like innate in me, but I was like, maybe I should pursue research first and do a PhD, go somewhere in that route, like study more about cancer. So I ended up not in an oncology lab or anything based like that. It was an infectious disease lab or an immunology lab. So it's slightly different. And they really inspired me. And they were like, you are really great at research, but you should really just go back. If you're worried about not getting into med school, you need to do a post-bac, like, or whatever. We're here to support you. But like the way your mission, like your personal ethos and your like outlook on the world, it's so rooted on wanting to help people. And that's why you should become a doctor, you know? And eventually it really clicked with me because at first I was like, oh my God, I love research so much. And I guess I'm becoming a doctor. I have two options. I could become like an MD, PhD, or I could become a pathologist who's definitely just in like a lab space the whole time. But then I realized I want to really cater my skills towards, you know, what could have helped my mom and what could have helped so many people like her. And so when I think about specifically lung cancer, yes, I could become an oncologist, but more specifically, why wait to get to that stage? We can talk about preventative measures, and talk about how nicotine addiction is so rampant within the AANHPI community, um, especially with like people of our age, like the Gen Z millennial age, and that ultimately leads into, potentially addiction-based medicine or like the psychiatry of it all. And that's what made me really want to go into psychiatry, to help like that particular audience, amongst many other things. But, ultimately, like if I look back, like going back to the core of it all, my mom and wanting to help her, you know, if there was some sort of intervention like that, and you and I are medical students, and I'm also in the middle of dedicated, so we know all about the different like modalities to prevent, like to ameliorate uh, addiction in that way, that could have helped her be here with us today. But there are so many layers to this experience that are so complex. And so it requires interventions from all fronts. But ultimately, with my skill set, with my, with the way I look at things, it ultimately led me down this particular path that we're here today. So, medical student, future physician, hopefully future psychiatrist, but also current national president of APAMSA. It's all connected.
It is. It's definitely all connected. And I just want to give you some praise about your storytelling. You managed to kind of sum up such a big and challenging chapter of your life and really showed how it drove you to your where you are today. And it's such a personal and inspirational story. So I thank you for that. That kind of leads to our next question of why psychiatry, but more specifically, I wanted to know, like, now that you are a medical student and you've kind of dived deeper into what psychiatry is, like, what are your thoughts so far? And, like, has what you initially expected or your initial feelings of it kind of changed or grown?
Yeah, I was okay. So, like I said, I was interested in pathology. After I realized that I was going to a DO school and MD PhD was like completely off the table, I was leaning towards pathology and psychiatry. And with the particular way my institution teaches pathology, histology, all of that, I realized like, yes, I do really love this stuff, but it wasn't for me. But then eventually I had my psychiatry professor. Um, and I have never felt more inspired by a professor and his approach to like medicine, his philosophy of medicine. Like that is what really pushed me into that direction and how you can help people through the lens of psychiatry. I remember, like, to be honest, medical school is like, I'm sure our listeners will know firsthand how hard medical school is. But for me, first year medical school for my particular institution, it's all systems based, but it's the sort of physiology of it first. And then in our second year, that's when we learn the clinical application. So the entire first year, there was no psychiatry. But the second year, when we finally did have psychiatry and the clinical application of it, like that, it sort of was like that light bulb moment for me in medical school. And it really made me think like, wow, I really do understand things. And everything from that point on was smooth sailing. And that really just stems from having a professor who just sort of was so inspirational. And so that's why, like, I'm still going down this route. It was because of that bout of inspiration. And so it essentially just sort of solidified what I wanted to do. And it was like, I remember one of the special things at my medical school is the way we approach like in-person learning or TBLs, like team-based learning. For this particular block for psychiatry, what we did was he would record a simulated patient, like psychiatry appointment visit, and it was being able to pick up um, all of the little cues, like from appearance, from speech, all of those things that would be a part of the MSE. Like, is being able to pick up on those nuances that made me realize, like, oh, I have a real knack for this because ultimately, like, you may not be able to tell, our listeners may not be able to tell, but I'm a particularly shy person. So that is why I hosted the podcast last year because I could just let them, our interviewees, just yap and I could be like, great topic, great idea, blah, blah, blah. And so similarly, like in the nature of psychiatry, like you can only be as successful as you can allow the patient to open up and to sort of divulge their inner secrets. And that stems from having the ability to create a safe space where somebody feels comfortable enough to do that. Maybe not even a safe space. I would rather describe it as a vulnerable space, because you're going to be allowing yourself to explore trauma, and that's not really safe. It's heartbreaking, but ultimately that allows for true healing, being able to recognize those things and move forward. And it's all of these things that I really got a good grasp from just from learning about it in my psychiatry didactic block.
That makes a lot of sense. And I've told you before um, that I commend anyone that is interested or wanting to pursue psychiatry due to just the amount of patience one has to have and also the amount of care to be able to help someone in those vulnerable mental health states and to possibly improve those outcomes. I also wanted to talk about kind of our identity, and particularly for you, you identify as a Chinese Filipino and LGBTQIA medical student. Can you talk about how this has shaped your approach to medicine and possibly your pursuit in psychiatry in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. When I think about like the intersectionality of being both queer and on Hoppy, it wasn't enough to just be one marginalized identity. I had to be two, but ultimately, like when it comes down to it, it's my sort of love for my own identity and being able to recognize that there are probably so many other individuals like myself who share that same like lived experiences that need essentially one somebody to go to or like some sort of role model or some sort of visibility, like anecdotally, um like going back, I remember these two intersecting identities. That is sort of why I became like, this is I guess super tangential, but there was a point in my life, and for our listeners who may not just be listeners but maybe watching the video component, they can tell that I have a really nice setup on the video screen. Uh and that is because I was once a streamer on Twitch, and I wanted to create a space for, people to feel welcome, to for people to feel at home, especially queer identifying folk or unhappy folk. That was like rooted in my entire like personality, And similarly, that is what drove me to want to shift the culture of APAMSA, to be more welcoming for all different identities and how they may intersect and so forth. And now that sort of leads to psychiatry, as we're aware, especially for like unhappy folk and us, like we can just start with unhappy folk, especially children of immigrants. The discussion of mental health is completely swept under the rug. If you were to say like, "Oh, I'm sad, I'm depressed," or whatever, it's just like, "Oh, just don't." That's like the kind of response you may get from your, uh, immigrant parent, But that's what I want to particularly tackle. It's like the destigmatization of mental health, because imagine what a difference I could make for even our parents, who may not recognize the importance of mental health. And even more so, alarming disproportionately of like rates of mental health issues for the queer community, And that's especially another very vulnerable group that I would love to serve. And so being able to figure out how I can best serve both of them, that is what would be my dream as a psychiatrist, like to open up some sort of like dedicated like helpline, some sort of clinic, that like caters to both of these identities, that's what I would particularly love to do one day. And I think about like, there was one person that I was friends with in college. They are both queer and Asian, but like they're also trans, And that experience, hearing firsthand from them, like all of their, you know, experiences with like just their whole lived experience. Like I can't even sum it up into words, but if there was anything I could do to help them, because how much they struggled with their own identity, how much we could help them, like just integrate better, but that all stems from like a, I don't know like how we can help them, but that is the things that I want to learn how to do and why I'm constantly pushing our LGBTQ director to do really cool events because I'm going to be the first one to check in, or like to be there because I still have so much learning to do. I'm only a rising third year. Quite frankly, I don't even know if I'm allowed to call myself a third year if I haven't passed boards yet. But the point is that I want to learn. And I think that's the beauty of psychiatry. It's constantly growing. And as we learn more things about like all of these different mental health issues, it's just so amazing that like we're continuously learning how to serve people in new ways and just making people feel safe, making people feel seen. And that's all I want to do in psychiatry.
At APAMSA, we have those avenues for our audience and listeners to explore more. We have a mental health and LGBTQIA director. Recently, we had June Pride Month, which we had a lot of activities and events to really just promote representation and increase our cultural knowledge regarding these marginalized communities. So all really, really important work. On that same note, what have been some highlights for you regarding APAMSA thus far, or challenges you've encountered with the national board?
Yeah, I mean, like the whole thing has just been a dream. Like, regardless of any challenges I may face, like someone texting me in the middle of the night to do something, I am never not grateful for every single day because one, this is what I wanted, and two, this is what exactly I dreamed of. So I welcome like all of our directors to reach out to me whenever, if there's anything I can do to help them or empower them or whatever, that is the dream. However, I do think ultimately like one of the challenges that we're all experiencing is definitely like the funding aspect of National APAMSA, the operational costs. And so that's something always looming in the back of my mind of how can we ensure APAMSA remains sustainable. However, on the flip side of that, like the highlights of the like leadership experience so far, I mean, truly, I'm not gonna lie, it was our executive board retreat over the weekend, which was hosted in Dallas, Texas, and being able to come together as an executive board, that was arguably the highlight so far. I actually text a lot of you guys on a regular basis, but the person I do text on a daily basis is Stephen Lin, our membership vice president. And I think since the executive board retreat, which was only about like 3 days ago, he has since texted me every single day, wow, I really miss everybody. And I'm like, I do too. But ultimately, being able to come together as the leaders of APAMSA to figure out how we can grow this organization, advance it, like carry it to new heights, that is what is inspiring to me. Having your guys' trust and faith, and me being able to give it directly back into you guys to help inspire all of your directors. That is the leadership experience I wasn't sure if I was going to have, especially jumping from fundraising director straight into the national presidency. There was a lot of imposter syndrome, something that we all have experienced, right? But being able to really come together and focus on what are the needs of APAMSA, what are our goals, you know, and being able to take everybody's branch goals and to incorporate them as the executive board for all of National APAMSA, that was the dream. And so as we progress through the rest of the year, all of the goals that we are hoping to accomplish, like that's what I'll be fighting for all of you guys. And that will be like the ultimate challenge, ensuring all of your dreams, all of the legacies that you want to be left behind are fulfilled.
What great highlights and reflections. And as someone who was part of that executive board retreat, I can absolutely say that that was such a productive yet fun and fulfilling experience. And I also grew much closer to several of the people that was able to make it, as particularly Stephen Lin is the one I also now text every day too. So shout out to Stephen if you're listening. And now I just wanted to do a little bit more of a get to know you for the next few questions. So something really interesting about James is that he's done over 100 escape rooms. That's such an interesting accomplishment. I just wanted to ask, what keeps you coming back and if you had a favorite one?
Ooh, okay. So I think so. The sort of lens to my whole Twitch streamer experience, I love video games. And the thing about an escape room is that they're like a video game, but in real life. It requires so much critical thinking, so much pattern recognition, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's why, just ultimately, a real life video game, something I truly crave. I think if you were to ask me what my like favorite escape room is, like, it's not about the room itself or the puzzles. It's about the experience I have in there, you know? And there was one, oh gosh, I'm gonna have to Google it. I don't even know if they exist anymore, but I think the company, I'm sorry for the keyboard ASMR, but there was an escape room where I'm from, which is San Diego. The company was called Steal and Escape. Not to like completely just like free sponsorship for them, but hey, if they end up listening, we would love to get a free room, right? But they have a room called the Lost Expedition. And for most of escape room experiences, it's a very linear experience. It's a very point A leads to point B, leads to point C. I think that's typically, and then usually it's all lock and key. That's a very Gen 1 experience for escape rooms. However, for the Lost Expedition, one of the things that make it particularly special is that all of the people in the room get assigned a role. Sort of like National APAMSA. Everybody has their own job. With that being said, this experience was particularly memorable for me and easily in the top three escape rooms for me because like this was the one of the last escape rooms I did on a a single day five escape room marathon before I moved from San Diego to Philly, separate from my family, separate from my friends, like my first real big move. And so we did all these escape rooms, and so I was with all of my like loved ones, right? And there was this one part of the room where like we realized like we were all split up into separate sections, but on the other section they were like, yo, we need like gasoline to like start this engine to turn on the lights. And I was like, gasoline? What? And then I was on the other side, right? With one of my best friends from high school. And like, we were like looking around the room, feeling for everything, looking for everything. And we saw a gasoline canister, right? And we like picked it up and it was like really heavy and like shaking, right? Shaking as in like we could like shift the liquid inside. And we were like, huh, like, is this what they're looking for? And then we found like a hole in the wall, and then we found like a tube, and we were like looking at the tube, we were looking at the gas canister, and I was asking like we were like, oh, is it like a metaphorical thing? So we like pretended to pour it in, and then like suddenly we hear on the the voice in the sky, or like the game master, they were like, it's not metaphorical, you actually need to pour the liquid. And then me and my like partner in the room, my best friend, we were like, oh my God. Like we could not, like she and I, we could not stop laughing for a solid like 3 minutes. And then my friends on the other side of the room, they were like, why are you and your best friend laughing so much? Like we need to like move on. And so that was one of my favorite experiences. And that is why I keep going back to escape rooms to find that like, sense of wonderment, I guess, uh, that I truly have not found anywhere else. That's sort of the reason why I was like so insistent on the executive board doing an escape room together to build that sense of teamwork, to build that sense of camaraderie, and I got to witness all of your leadership styles come out. And again, special shout out to Katrina, our strategy vice president. She really like she really like was one of the standouts for me because like I remember during the room towards the end, like we were running out of time and we were all getting so stressed, right? But I saw her like get let's get down to business like POV. And I was like, wow, this is like a real medical student, like taking charge, not wanting to fail. And so I really hope that in the near future, we can continue to do more escape rooms together. I think, spoiler alert, that's one of the things we have planned for the national board retreat. And we can definitely all come together again in the future, potentially for national conference when the executive board again is all in the same place. But yeah, I love escape rooms, real life video game.
That's such a fun story. Thank you for sharing that. And not to advertise, but we are making a video to kind of show our audience what the EB retreat was like. So that will be releasing or maybe have been released on YouTube by the time this podcast episode comes out. So if you're interested in seeing us all scramble our heads during the executive board retreat and try the escape room, please check out our YouTube video. For the people who are watching, seeing your room, you have some Keroppis, is that how it's pronounced? Can you tell
Yes.
me a little bit more about, is it an obsession? Is it is it just something you like to collect? Tell me more about it.
Yeah, it's just like one of those quirky things. Like, I, I think it's just like nice to have like an identifiable thing. But I remember growing up, all of my friends were such huge Sanrio fans, and Keroppi is one of those mascot characters from the brand, right? And with that being said, like I remember I talked so much about my mom earlier, but my mom was a huge fan of Keroppi. My big brother was also a huge fan of Keroppi. I don't know why, but ultimately it sort of just like trickled its way down onto me. So it's just like one of those feel good characters. And also, I guess like really quirky fun fact and shows like what a Keroppi stan I am is that his dad canonically is also a doctor. So I don't know, I just think that's really cute. I don't think any other Sanrio character has any like physician in their lineage, so that especially lends to why um big fan of this little frog guy. But ultimately, like there's nothing deeper to it. It's just also just like sort of nice. Like whenever I do see one, it's like, oh, I should add that to the collection. Unfortunately, I can't move my camera right now, but I have like a whole pile of them in my room. It is like a little bit scary because they all have these like big eyes and they're all staring at me. But it's very cute. Um yeah.
If you had to estimate, how many did you have?
It's not that many. We can realize it's not that many. It's about like maybe like 20, which
Okay.
sounds like a lot. But I think also, let me be clear, I'm a huge fan of stuffed animals. For those of you who are watching the video component, this thing right here. For any of you that may have been to the arcade round one, I'm a huge claw machine aficionado. Like, you guys have no idea. I used to go after every single test in medical school, after every single test when I was in my post back in Philly, I'd just drive or walk to round one and just spend like an hour or two just playing claw machines as like a self-care activity. And so I like have just amassed a collection of plushies that I usually give away, especially for like those claw machines are very rigged. But the point is that if I ever see like some family and like a little kid who's like wasting all of their parents' money, I'll always like give them like my collection of plushes that I like have on my person. Because usually when I walk out, I'm walking out with like 4 or 5 of them at a time. And it is quite embarrassing being like this old, but it is just a hobby. I just love a good arcade game, love video games of any shape or form. But yeah.
I love arcades too, and I can definitely resonate with like that feeling or that high of being able to um, even get a claw machine item. Those are very difficult. So if you're good at them, and it sounds like you are, um, that is amazing. And then a little bit back to your background. You've lived in San Diego, Philadelphia, and now you're in Nevada, Las Vegas, Nevada. What are your favorite and least favorite things about each of these places?
Okay. Really quickly, San Diego, perfect weather, hate driving. Las Vegas, I can go to Philly. Philly, I love being in a walkable city. I crave that so much, you know. On the flip side, I hate the summers. Um, I can't stand the humidity. I'm not built for that. And then and I remember there was this one summer when I was in Philly for my post back. I remember like just like hanging out outside. And then when I came home, I remember the next day I was just covered in like mosquito bites and I had no idea. But that's just like one of the trials and tribulations of being like out and about in like such a humid environment, I guess. And then as for Vegas, mm, I can tell you what I don't like, and that's like the summer heat, you know? But what I do like is how it's being developed, and it reminds me of SoCal a lot, um, with its like very ever-growing Asian community. And most recently, they just laid the like official groundwork to establish like a Filipino town, which means a lot to me. Um, yeah, I don't know what I particularly love about Las Vegas, but it is just like a really cool vibe. And I think ultimately, like, since it is growing so rapidly, developing so rapidly, I could definitely see myself laying roots here. And if a program director is listening for psychiatry, I would love to stay in Vegas or anywhere. Happy to go anywhere. Hopefully, a big city. But yeah.
And if a program director is listening, we all as a PAMSA vouch for James. He's a great, great person and going to be a great resident. So we hope you can achieve your ultimate goal, James. So next round, we're going to do some rapid fire questions, some more get to know you, and feel free to offer a quick elaboration or if not, we'll just move on to the next question, okay? Okay. Coffee or tea?
T. I was the one, again, for context for our listeners, I was the person who developed the framework of the like one-on-one, like the conversation with, and like the intro, the middle section, and the rapid fire question. So I recognize we are supposed to be quick about it. But the reason why I don't drink coffee is because when I was preparing for the MCAT, I would drink like, let's say, a shot of espresso or two to like chug through the day. And then as I kept getting closer to my exams, I would like do, okay, maybe three shots of espresso. And then when it got to the day of the actual exam, I like went to Starbucks and I got like a quad in my drink and I threw it like I just drank it right away, right before my exam. And I had such intense palpitations and nausea that I had to cancel my exam. So I know, like, I try my best to not drink coffee, hence tea.
Okay, that makes sense. And we also recommend to not do 4 shots of espresso in your coffee. Oh, that's a lot. Okay. Morning or night?
Night. Morning. I was gonna say I like the morning. I get up about 3:30 a.m. every day, so morning.
Okay. Can you tell us more about the 3:30 a.m. routine?
Yeah, no, I just like the quietness and peacefulness of the morning, you know? I like the dawn essentially. I like being able to I get up that early so I can go to the gym and it's like especially quiet. And then like I really enjoy like as soon as I step out of the gym, I can see like the sun rising in the horizon. And I think that's like a really beautiful, peaceful time where the day isn't like started yet. And by that point, like it's like 5:30 or so, right? And I can get my day started super early, which means I can also end super early. So I'm usually done studying so from 6 to 3, which is about like 9 hours of productivity, which is more than I should be doing. So that's usually my like everyday schedule. And the rest of the afternoon, I can work on APAMSA stuff or like personal stuff.
What is your favorite comfort food?
Ooh, I think like a good grilled cheese. I don't really know. A comfort food implies like an ease of access or like a really rapid thing. So for me, like it's really easy to always make a grilled cheese. If you've never made a grilled cheese or if you have made a grilled cheese, I highly recommend using mayonnaise instead of butter to like sort of toast each side. The mayonnaise will change the game. But I think like for accessibility and like whenever I'm sick, like tomato soup and a grilled cheese is always sounding great. Yeah, I think that would be my answer. The other answer I had in mind was mac and cheese. Either way, I'm severely lactose intolerant.
Both very cheesy answer choices, and I'll have to try the mayonnaise hack. What is your dream vacation destination?
They always joke that like when you get to, our age, Ying, we don't need to age ourselves. But the point is that when you get to our age, whenever you go on like Instagram or social media, all you see are your friends probably going to one of two places. It's probably Italy or Japan. I went to Japan, and I think there was a period of I just went to Japan in January. My point being is that I literally think about Japan almost like after the trip, it was every single day. Most recently, it's like every other day. But I'll always be texting like somebody like, man, I miss Japan. So I would like to go back there.
I would miss Japan too if I got a chance to go. Who is your favorite RuPaul Drag Race queen?
Oh, okay. Easy answer. The winner of season 5, and I guess spoiler alert, All Star 7, but that was like 3 seasons ago. Her name is Jinx Monsoon. She's from Seattle. She's described as more of like a campy queen. For those of you who may be familiar with that term, now that I think about it, I don't even know how to define camp aside from the original, I guess, like, I think her name is Susan Sontag. Susan Sontag? Yes, she's an American writer, but camp is described as a failed seriousness in her, like, essay, like, Notes on Camp, which inspired the Met Gala, and I think around about 2019. I could be wrong about that as well. Let me double check that. Camp Notes on Fashion. Yeah, 2019. Um, with that being said, Jinx Monsoon is like such an advocate in the queer community. Um, and that's what I like for in a queen, you know? I think especially all of our identities as like marginalized communities, as physicians, like whatever it may be, it is so inherently political. And drag itself is such a beautiful art form, and art inherently should be political. It should have meaning. And that's what I like that she applies to all of her performances, some sort of uh like political lens to it. Yeah.
Favorite quote or mantra that you live by?
Uh this is one of those questions that I wish I had the prompt for. Um I think for me, the mantra I usually live by is like, gosh, I'm gonna butcher this, but it's like, leave the world in a better place than you found it in. That's how you should be living life. And that's what I hope to do as a physician. That's what I hope to do as the national president of APAMSA, to just make it a better space for everybody, to help it grow, you know? Yeah.
And just as a kind of left field question, what is your favorite branch of APAMSA?
That is a hard question. I should say the executive branch.
Good choice.
No, but genuinely, like, that's like trying to pick a favorite kid. The point being is that like there are so many directors in every single branch that I get so inspired by. It's hard for me to just pick one because like everybody's work is so, so important. Like when you think about a cog in a machine, if you take out one singular cog, the machine will no longer function. And so that's why I don't have a particular favorite branch of APAMSA. Everybody's work is so well integrated with one another that we need each other to succeed, and that's what I really want to continue fostering within APAMSA. Whenever you have a singular idea, it's so much better when we can come together and collaborate with one another, which is like sort of the theme of the executive board retreat. It was all about working with one another. And that's what I want to leave behind when it comes to the legacy we've all done, just fostering a better sense of family, a better sense of collaboration within the national board, you know, something like home. So yeah, no favorite.
That makes sense, given that if you did choose a favorite and it was not communications branch, I would absolutely riot. Just kidding. Thank you so much, James, for sharing your journey, your vision, and your energy with us today. It's been an absolute joy to really get to know the person behind the National President Leadership title. And we really can't wait to see what is ahead for you and for APAMSA under your presidency. With that, any last final notes or thoughts for our audience?
I just thank you so much, Ying, for, well, first, thank you, Ying, for inviting me to the pod. It is so nice to see it continue to grow. As for our listeners, I will say we have so many things planned for you guys on the horizon, whether it's all of the regional conferences, the new hepatitis conference being transformed into the HEAL Summit. If you want to learn more, contact the Health Affairs Vice President. And then finally, our national conference, which it will be officially, I'll give you like the preview. It will be towards the end of February. So the date is tentative, but the location is not, and that is UC San Francisco School of Medicine. And ultimately, like I hope you guys will all be there so I can personally like greet you and meet you because I love meeting like the folks of APAMSA, the leadership, the members, everyone. Um, and yeah, I just thank you for continuing to support APAMS, and I hope we can all grow and learn together.
Thank you to all our listeners for tuning in to White Coats and Rice. Sure to follow us on social media at National PAMSA and stay connected with PAMSA for more episodes, updates, and community stories. Until next time, take care.